Hello viewers and welcome to a new weekly upload. I posted last week and thank you for the support on that video, getting over 24,000 views in less than a week. That is an incredible stat. But anyways, the two criteria for this video is I had to be at the race, which is pretty self-explanatory given the title of the video. And the other criteria is it's only cup races. Xfinity and trucks, it's just a lot harder to remember those races, and the racing in them, they kind of blend together. And there's surely a bunch of good Xfinity truck races I can go through, and I've really worked my brain hard enough. I can probably make a video on those down the line, but yeah, we'll just stick with Cup for now. But anyways, enjoy the video, and thank you for watching. We got two honorable mentions. The first is the 2016 Daytona 500. The only reason this one isn't on my top 10 list is it was a good bit ago. It's hard for me to remember the specific details, but it was definitely worth a mention. The finish is iconic in NASCAR history. Denny Hamlin and Martin Truex battling side by side down to the line. The closest Daytona 500 finish ever. Problem is, I just can't remember much of the details of this race. The only thing I can remember, it was Toyota domination. But it deserved at least a mention in this video. The next honorable mention is the 2021 Geico 500. This is my only Talladega race I've ever attended, and it was a very good one. The 550, not the 550 package, the Gen 6 plate package was very good, especially in 2019 to 2021. And this race is just another one of those good races. This race also included Joey Logano blowing over down the backstretch. Definitely a memorable moment, but just barely misses the cut of this video. But definitely one of my favorite races I've been to in person. Now into the meat and potatoes of the video. Number 10, the 2021 Bank of America Roval 400. This race is memorable for two reasons in particular. The first reason is Kevin Harvick versus Chase Elliott. A little refresher, a couple weeks before this at Bristol, Kevin Harvick and Chase Elliott got into a little contact. Chase Elliott blew a tire. Chase Elliott ruined Kevin Harvick's race, and Kevin Harvick in this race decided to retaliate. Now, this contact didn't end Chase Elliott's day, and Chase Elliott wouldn't make a comeback, but it seemed for the moment Harvick had gotten his retaliation that he wanted from Bristol. However, Chase Elliott would recover, and with 11 laps to go, Kevin Harvick was seen to be intimidated by Chase Elliott in his mirror and went overdrive turn 1. Now, this is, as a Harvick fan, this race is definitely a painful one. Definitely not Harvick's greatest moment, but it was memorable. Let's or not, it definitely still sings. The second reason this race is memorable is it was Kyle Larson. Kyle Larson had an up and down day. He had mechanical issues early on that actually put him below the cut line in the middle of his dominating 2021 season. He would end up coming back all the way from, I believe, like 36th, all the way to the lead, and he would win this race and submit his place in the round of 8. Kyle Larson would go on to win the 2021 championship, and I believe 4 more races after the Roval. Now on to number 9 on this list, the 2025 Daytona 500. This is actually this year's edition of the Great American Race. And this race has some personal aspects on why it's on here, but I actually don't hate the next-gen super speedway racing at Daytona. Talladega is another issue. Talladega is not great with this car, but at least at Daytona, they can run 3-wide naturally without the fuel saving. So there's a ton of 3-wide action in this race. Stage 1 had it, Stage 2 had it, Stage 3 had it. You had a lot of comers and goers. The Fords were, again, always strong like they are at Daytona, but like Daytona always does, there's always a couple crashes that would spice things up. You had a crash early in Stage 2. Helio Castroneves and Chastain got taken out, which sucks for me. I was cheering for both those guys, and it just sucks seeing them get taken out very early on. You also had Ricky Stenhouse make a pretty dumb move with about 20 to go and just block Joey Logano and cause a 8-9 car crash on the backstretch. You also had a pretty memorable crash in this race as well, with Ryan Preece having his second flip at Daytona in 2 years, doing a backflip down the backstretch and almost hitting the catch fence in turn 3. definitely one of the wildest flips in honestly NASCAR history. I've never seen a car do a reverse flip, a back flip, and it was just wild to see in person. Tim Brown, you've probably seen his channel. He has a good video of it, and like, we were just both freaking out. The finish of this race was your typical Daytona 500, a massive wreck on the backstretch. William Byron sneaks through. Tyler Reddick sneaks into second. Jimmy Johnson somehow ended up third in this race. But William Byron would end up winning his second Daytona 500 in a row. And this would be his only win of the season until Iowa later in the year. Number 8 on this list is another Daytona 500, the second of many Daytona 500s on this list. It is the 2022 edition of the Great American Race. This race was the first ever next-gen points race, and it exposed some issues with the next-gen car, Harrison Burton flipping at what seemed like 140 miles an hour. But this race was pretty solid. It was a clean Daytona 500 for recent standards. There wasn't a ton of cautions for incident. Not a lot of wrecked race cars. You still had your typical big ones. You had your flip. But I say relatively clean for a Daytona 500. This race is known for the flip and also Austin Cindric, who would shock everyone and win this race as a rookie and in only his 8th start. Definitely not without controversy, though. He would have to walk his teammate Ryan Blaney up the track, and this would cause a massive crash coming to the line. But Austin Cindric would barely edge out Bubba Wallace, and he would get his first career win. Austin Cindric has won a couple more races since then, but this still remains the high point of his young career so far in the Penske number 2 car. Hopefully he can have more success later down the line. The third Daytona 500 in a row on this list, at number 7, the 2024 edition of the Great American Race. This race was definitely one of the best Daytona 500s I've ever been to. 3 wide, the last 20 or so laps before the big one, is some of the best racing I have ever seen in the Daytona 500. They were 3 wide, 3x3 throughout the pack. Drivers jockeying for position. Ross Chastain, my favorite driver, battling for the lead for this whole time. It was just a spectacle to watch. You had the Hendrick cars battling on the bottom. You had the Penske car of Logano and the other Penske car, Blaney. You had Brad Keselowski battling for the win, battling for his first Daytona 500. You had all the storylines for a great Daytona 500 finish. Unfortunately, a lot of them would end up wrecked in the big one with about 10 to go, which was set up a late race restart with 3 to go. And this race is kind of lowered on the list, mainly because the finish was kind of anticlimactic. Ross Chastain and Cindric spin across the line. Caution comes out after on the white flag, and William Byron will win his first Daytona 500. He would proceed to win the Daytona 500 the year after, as you saw at number 9 on this list. But if this race had a better, more solid finish, it would definitely be higher on the list. The first Atlanta race on this video, at number 6, we got the 2023 Quaker State 400. This race, in my opinion, I think put Atlanta in the good graces of many NASCAR fans today, as I think this race proved that the new Super Speedway configuration of this track actually produced some of the best racing on the schedule. This was the first night race in Atlanta too, so the atmosphere for this race was amazing. And just personally, away from the racing, the attendance for New Atlanta, ever since they changed it to a Super Speedway, I think is drastically improved. And it's a whole separate video I want to make on how this configuration's basically saved this racetrack that I believe was dying before the reconfiguration. Back to the race. The racing was amazing. Handling mattered. I'm pretty sure the summer heat had something to do with it. June and July are some of the hottest months in Atlanta. Being a Georgia native, I can attest to that. William Byron ended up winning this race. Unfortunately, the race being rain shortened. But, I mean, Atlanta, in June, July, once again, it's the hottest and also one of the wettest months. Pop-up thunderstorms exist. But even with the rain-shortened finish, I believe this is probably one of the best races of that season. Definitely one of the best seasons of William Byron's career. I believe he won 6 races this year. And he would go on to win the regular season title and make it to the championship 4. Fortunately, he wouldn't win the championship, but that's entirely a new topic for another video. At number 5, we got the one and only 2021 Coke 0400 at Daytona. This is the only summer Daytona race on this list. I've only been to 2 of those races, the other one being a massive crapshoot, being the year after with the rain and such. This race, however, once again proved why the Gen 6 Super Speedway package towards the end of its life was some of the best racing NASCAR had to offer. The package produced great 3-wide action, and a lot of wild cards ended up at the front later on this race. Chris Buescher, usually a pretty calm driver, was making aggressive moves trying to make the playoffs. Ross Chastain, who was known for being aggressive, made a ton of aggressive moves towards the end of this race, which is not unexpected. Matt DiBenedetto was up front, and you also had the typical contenders like Denny Hamlin and Joey Logano battling for the win. But at the end of this race, it ended up being Ryan Blaney who would get the lead on the final lap. With a wild final lap, he was blocking Kevin Harvick, Daniel Suarez, and Corey LaJoie for the win. Going down the backstretch, Suarez would get a run, try to pass Harvick, and you would end up getting spun by Kurt Busch, causing a massive crash into turn 3. The race would end under caution. Ryan Blaney would end up the winner, and this would be his 3rd win of the year, and what would be his breakout season. This race is everything a cutoff race to the playoffs should be, and is why it's number 5 on this list. And number 4, that's the second time Atlanta Motor Speedway is going to pop up on this list. It is the 2025 Quaker State 400. This race got off to a rough start with 2 major crashes at the beginning of the race, including the largest crash in now Echo Park Speedway history. I believe like 22 cars were involved, taking out a lot of the contenders, but it actually ended up kind of being a blessing in disguise. With only like 20 competitive cars left on the track, the racing was actually incredible. You had so many underdogs like Zane Smith and Ricky Stenhouse battling for the win. You had Alex Bowman battling for his playoff life. But you also had the big names like Tyler Reddick and Brad Keselowski battling for the win. Brad Keselowski needing a win to make the playoffs. And just all the storylines ended up finding their way to the front. And the finish would set up great with Brad Keselowski trying to hold off Chase Elliott to win his way into the playoffs. But unfortunately, Chase Elliott would get to the inside and pass Brad Keselowski in a great move into turn 1. And with help from his teammate, Chase Elliott would cruise to victory and break a long winless streak that dated back to the year before at Texas. Overall, this race was amazing. The racing was incredible, even with half the field having damage or just being out of the race. This was the wildest I've ever heard a racetrack after a race. I mean, of course, it's Chase Elliott. What do you expect? At number 3, this one is going to be kind of controversial, no matter where I put it, high or low. It's the 2020 Daytona 500. This was my last race actually before COVID, which is kind of funny. But this race is known for really the final lap crash that we've all seen a billion times with Ryan Newman. But the racing before this was incredible. Once again, it's the Gen 6 Super Speedway package. It's going to produce banger racing. And this race had 2 3-wide desperate moves. Ross Chastain making an aggressive move that ended up wrecking himself. But then the finish, albeit it's just hard to watch still. The Ryan Newman crash is still etched in a lot of NASCAR fans' memories as probably one of the scariest wrecks in recent NASCAR memory. Thankfully, he survived, and thankfully we can look back on this with hindsight and look at what was probably a very good Daytona 500, and just unfortunately it was overshadowed by this final lap crash, and rightfully so. On a more lighthearted note, we got the 2025 Coke 600. This race is again from this current season that I'm recording this in, and this race definitely didn't disappoint. The Coke 600 has been one of the best races with the Gen 7 car, the 2022 edition being one of the best races in NASCAR history, the 2023 version keeping up that pace. The 2024 version never really had a shot to continue that, and it ended under rain, unfortunately. And you also had plenty of storylines going into this race. You had the double for the second year in a row. Kyle Larson was attempting it. That would be a little more shaky this time later on, as Kyle Larson would wreck in both the Indy 500. He would wreck from the lead in this race, and he would end up wrecked out in stage 3 of this race. But overall, the racing of this race was incredible, and again, the storylines, besides the double, are incredible with all these underdogs running towards the front, like Carson Hocevar and AJ Allmendinger, the legacy motor cars of Eric Jones and John Hunter Nemechek, Jimmy Johnson making his 700th NASCAR start, like Connor Zilisch was in this race. Like, it was just, you had tons of storylines going into this race, and it just didn't disappoint. The racing was incredible, and honestly, it was pretty clean, besides one wreck with Suarez, Blaney, Larson in Stage 3 that took out Larson and Justin Haley as well. This race was relatively clean, but the main reason this race is on this list is Ross Chastain. I am a massive Ross Chastain fan, and I was crying when he won this race. I was on the verge of happy tears because I got to see my favorite driver win one of the biggest races on the NASCAR schedule, one of the best races I've ever seen in person, and he got to cap it off. It was just the icing on the cake, stealing the win from William Byron and Denny Hamlin at the end, and pulling off a major comeback, coming from dead last and 40th after wrecking his car in practice to the lead and winning this race, basically pulling off the first challenge, and definitely putting this race in one of my favorites of all time. However, there is one race I believe that is better than all the other races on this list, and that is the 2024 Ambetter House 400. Now, the name on the surface probably won't ring a bell, but if I tell you the 2024 Spring Atlanta race, everyone's going to know what I'm talking about. This race is arguably one of the best races of the Gen 7 era, probably the best drafting race of the Gen 7 era, and just the best racing I have probably ever seen at Atlanta. This race had it all. The atmosphere. Going into turn 1, the sun just setting at the perfect angle. It looked incredible. The racing was incredible. We had drivers pulling off 4 wide at Atlanta. They narrowed the track 2 years before to make sure that didn't happen, and drivers were still pulling off the most insane moves I have ever seen at any racetrack, even Daytona or Talladega. It was impressive how good the racing was and how clean it was. There's very few wrecked race cars after this race. And then just the last 2 laps of this race, everyone has seen the finish of this race. This finish went viral for a very good reason, as probably one of the best NASCAR finishes ever. We have never seen a finish like that. 3 wide to the line with Ryan Blaney, Daniel Suarez, and Kyle Busch dueling it out for the win. And just looking at this in hindsight too, that Daniel Suarez, he's out of Trackhouse. This is his last win at the time of recording this video. Kyle Busch hasn't won since this race. Ryan Blaney is the only driver out of all these 3 that has remained kind of in top tier shape. But this race, just all the storylines, even in hindsight, it's just crazy to watch. And just Daniel Suarez, the underdog win, capping it all off. Just with the icing on the cake for one of the best races, not just I've been to in person, but ever. And just prove that New Atlanta is one of the best racetracks on the schedule. And honestly deserves a video on how it's probably saved this racetrack, as I believe this reconfiguration has saved Atlanta Motor Speedway. And that is the top 10 NASCAR races I've seen in person. I love going to NASCAR races. They're some of my favorite things I do every year. I get to go to the Daytona 500, both Atlanta races, and a couple others sprinkled in. I have one more race I'm going to this year. I'm going to Vegas in the fall. Hopefully that race can be added to this list. And I'd also like to hear what your list would be. I know not everyone's been to as many races as me. I'm very lucky that I get to go to all these races. But it could be a top 5, a top 3, or just your one race you've been to. Anyways, thank you for watching, and please like and subscribe.